right, so you met Radvan when you were about, what, 13?
Well, I started training with him when I was 13.
Well, yeah, sorry. You started training. Yeah. Now, what was your intention there? I mean, you know, you got showed this amazing leg lock. It hurt like you probably never been hurt before.
Defense. You got to remember, and sometimes, believe it or not, people do forget this. There was no such thing as submission grappling. I mean, not in Cleveland, not anywhere that we were aware of, outside of probably judo, and you know that's completely different. No, my focus was learning how to fight for self-defense, and that was Radvan's purpose. You know, to teach me the real catch wrestling, not the phony BS. You know that everybody was doing. You know, we had something called Big Time Championship Wrestling, I think. It was all fake stuff, naturally. And, you know, he taught me how to spot how a work match goes and so on, down the line, naturally. But our training from day one was geared for one thing only, self-defense. Heavy with the ripping, heavy with the hooks, and the mental aspect of it. Because no one would have been able to envision, you know, what is it, 16 years later, something like the UFC. You know, no, who would have thought that? So we trained, there were no rules. And that's another thing I like to talk about. You know, it's funny how now people talk to me or send me emails about catch rules. There's no such thing as catch rules. All these quote-unquote rules were all about worked matches. You know, the 3-second pinfall, this and that. There wasn't a legitimate catch match anywhere for decades and decades and decades. You go all the way back to Farmer Burns and Frank Gotch and those guys, Ed Strangler Lewis even. They all participated in work matches, okay? So really what Stanley Radvan was passing along to me was the epitome of what wrestling was all about. Not just American catch as catch can or anything like that, but wrestling from its roots, okay? As one of the, if not the oldest sport. And back then, those sports were not like the sports today. They were very difficult, very brutal, and at times could be fatal. So regardless, when we sat down and he told me, he says, you know, there's no place to go. You're not going to get into the professional wrestling business. This was all about fighting, learning to defend yourself. And one thing that he told me, and I told you guys, I want the worst suffering and pain and beatings that you take to be in the gym. Therefore, you're prepared for anything else outside in the real world. And thank God, the catch wrestling and also the boxing, I'm not going to diminish that, because I always strike when I fight. It's first and foremost. It has saved my life on more than one occasion. And that's not a cliche. I mean, literally, it has saved my life, and you're privy to certain situations that have happened relatively recently where I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the training that I had. So I'm beyond thankful. I'm very lucky.
Now, I've been to the gym plenty. I've seen the way you decorate. You know, a lot of people think of it as strictly a wrestling gym. Obviously, there's a large number of machines for weightlifting, various aerobic exercises. They got the bikes and whatnot. But something that's always kind of been interesting to me is there's a ton of pictures of boxers up everywhere. There's very few wrestlers, really at all, in terms of, you know, guys like you know, Lou Thesz or Strangler Lewis or any of those guys from that era, you know, that were, you know, had legitimate skill. Why don't you display those guys?
Good question. I have the picture of Lou when he called me a hooker, when he, you know, as he wrote on the photograph, "Welcome to the exclusive club of hookers," because that was a personal memento. I also have an obituary of him and Stanley Radvan. The reason I don't have it is because while they were legitimate and they were both incredibly good fighters and athletes, they made their living, the majority of it, in the professional wrestling aspect of it, doing work matches, fake matches. This gym isn't about fake. Okay, this gym is about authenticity. And yes, while boxers have taken dives and you know, fixed fights, photos of the fighters that we have, the boxing fighters, are legitimate fights, or they're legitimately training. I'm not going to put up a photo of two wrestlers participating in a fake match. You know, that that is a black mark, I think, on Catch as Catch Can that lives to this day. And sadly, you still have some people who are trying to portray that fake stuff as real. And to their credit, if they can fool somebody, they did a really good job. But professional wrestling is akin to acting. And in this gym, there's no acting. It's real. And the wrestling that I teach is just a very small part of it. You know, I'm more of a, I teach the striking and the stand-up and the weapons and defenses and all that stuff. Because that's how I was raised. That's what I was brought up on. I've been attacked so many times with weapons and so on and da-da-da. I'm sorry, but I just can't honor, you know, the fake stuff. I mean, nowadays it's actually not as bad because they're not, you know more about professional wrestling nowadays than I do, but I don't think they're trying to pass it off as a legitimate match.
No,
they're calling it entertainment.
Yeah, sports entertainment.
Sports entertainment, and that's fine, and I respect the hell out of those guys. They're phenomenal athletes, and they always were. Some of them, naturally, not everybody's in shape, but I can't abide by, you know, trying to pass something that isn't legit as legit. It's a pet peeve of mine, and you know, it's, well, Stanley and I talked about this, Lou Thesz and I talked about this, a couple other professional wrestlers and I have discussed this, you know, and hey, I understand everybody's got to make a living, you know, and again, there were some terrifically tough men that wrestled professionally. You know, that doesn't mean that every match that they had, you know, was a legitimate match. So let's separate fantasy from reality here.